The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Okanagan First Nations. Here I live rurally, intergenerationally, as animistically as I can, and collapseware as I can, just a short drive away from a small town known as Summerland, BC. And happy summer season. Blessings upon you and your beloveds as we approach the summer solstice. I hope the turning of the wheel of the year helps you gain momentum in a really good way. I'm hoping that that's what it's doing for me, at least, after what felt like interminable weeks in a slump with lots of sadness and conflict and despair. Now I am hoping that with the ingress of Jupiter into Cancer, that there is some kind of longer term upswelling of good feelings on the home front for me in the coming year. Jupiter just moved from one of the hardest signs it can be in into one of the best signs it can be in. And it takes an entire year to travel through a sign. So I've got my fingers crossed for this to be merciful, if not totally miraculous, of a shift for me. I remember ages ago, still to today, Canada's astrology sweetheart, Georgia Nichols, she always refers to the planet Jupiter as Moneybags Jupiter, which is nice when that happens, when Jupiter brings financial ease. But it's really just like the overall sense of abundance, true prosperity on all the levels, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, that Jupiter can bless us with. And that's what I'm hoping for me and for all of us. But of course, if you want it, you got to go get it. So I'm not just waiting for Jupiter to drop well-being in my lap every day. I'm trying to remind myself to access at least one of my resources, ideally more than one, ideally one for each dimension of my being, something physically resourcing for my body, something for my heart, or my sense of beauty or companionship, something for my mind to reassure me that I'm going to survive all this overwhelm, or that there are things I could look forward to, or just that there's proof that not everything is as bad as my mind is making it out to be, because my mind is admittedly stuck in a really intense negativity bias right now. I got to say, my impulse right now, the instinct in my body is to enumerate all the ways that things actually are really challenging right now. But the point is, I don't need to enumerate them because I'm not denying that they exist. I'm just also trying to notice that there are also some factually good things happening as well. Whew. Negativity bias, man, trying to pull me back in. Spiritually, I'm trying to connect with spirit every day, not just through prayer and begging for help and intercession, but noticing all the ways that nature presents itself to me and invites me into wonder and a feeling of accompaniment. And I do often feel that the natural world is trying to cheer me up. I have a lot of animal visitations here where I am, and I'm constantly finding bones from my divination set and lucky stones and things like that. So that is happening. And so I'm really working hard to keep my head above water here. And I would say it's working so far more days than it's not working. But I really think the increase of extra support and just energy, I'm really hoping it's going to make a big shift for me. Many of you know that my parenting journey is just one aspect that's been pretty tricky the last couple of years for that. But lately, in the last couple weeks, our family's been connected with our region's early psychosis intervention team. And that means our access to a local safety net has suddenly expanded overnight to include a team of 7 incredible medical professionals, mental health practitioners and specialized therapists, doctors, etc. And because we're a rural community, they make house calls And I think what's happened is that ever since we got that call, because we'd been on a wait list for something like that for over 2.5 years, like looking for some more consistent, longer term mental health support that would include like emergency intervention as needed. I think what's happened is that I'm experiencing now, since we got the news that they contacted, like, hey, you're top of the list. I think now I'm experiencing kind of like this protracted adrenaline crash where it's like suddenly you don't have to hold everything yourself anymore. And then when someone takes a little bit of weight off you, you just like collapse. I think that's kind of what's happened. It's not the main crux of why this winter and spring has been so hard, but that was kind of like, what's the opposite of a straw breaking a camel's back? It's like somebody took something out of the Jenga tower and I just I just kind of crumbled into a bit of a heap, right? Look, again, the parenting journey is definitely not the only thing that's happened to put me into this collapse response, for sure. Just want to be clear. I am in no way resentful or blaming, or not even 1/2 of 1% feeling like overburdened parenting someone with complex needs and dynamic disability. I very much welcome inhabiting a whole different kind of world that is not motivated by succeeding in capitalism. So I love it. Okay, underscore that. But for my body, I think sometimes we just don't know how much we're carrying until we lay it down for a second. And it's like there was just so much high functioning, and now that I have competent help, I'm just sort of suddenly feeling the anguish of my child and I not having had that help for so long. So like before I was in survival mode and now I can just let it go and kind of crash out. Anyway, you may also remember that in a past episode, this is before we got the call that help was on the way, I'd said that I'd tried everything to try to craft an autistic lifestyle for my kid, like one with fewer people, infrequent change in routine, and low sensory input. But ultimately, we just couldn't find that in the city. And remember, I said, like, we've done all the different modalities of therapy. We've accessed all the mental health and medical supports we can here in the city. And the situation isn't getting better. It's just getting more complex. And I said, I think what my child really needs is 20 acres and a couple of horses. So we moved out here to my in-laws' place in the Okanagan, which is more than 20 acres. It's basically like 35 acres of mountainside and 35 acres of flat land. And I've been here for over 6 months now. My kid kind of bounces back and forth right now between here and Victoria. And my husband had gone back to Victoria for a couple months to finish. So I'm the one that's sort of been here continuously the longest. And just yesterday, I bought my kid their horse. And I bought a horse for Reuben too. So now we all have our own horses. And now my job will be building fences for the rest of the summer so we can bring all the horses home this fall. And so the horses we got are wild horses that are managed by the Okanagan Indian Band. Now in Canada, wild horses are called cayuse, which is an Indigenous term. I believe it's a Chilcotin word, which just means horse, right? So when the cayuse become overpopulated, there are more vehicular accidents with them because of human development into their grazing lands, right? Like just encroachment by humans into the wild spaces just means the wildies end up meeting humans. And of course, most humans consider them a pest and they get hurt. So to save the wildies from being sent to the meat auction to be culled or prevent them from being injured by being hit by cars and trucks, the band has a trainer, Aaron Stelkaya, and Aaron is a third-generation rancher and intergenerational survivor of residential schools. His mother, Jane Stelkaya, is the oldest member of the band and famous in the region for herself being a cowgirl, a wild horse tamer. And anyway, now it's Aaron and his crew of cowboys and cowgirls who round up the most sociable horses, the ones who show the most interest and engagement and like willingness to work with humans, the most curiosity. And every sort of late winter, early spring, they round up those ones and then they bring them into the ranch and they train them up. And then in June, they put them up for auction. to save them from being hurt or killed or, something bad. And so instead they send them to good homes. So they're just what they call green broke. Like they still need tons of training. Okay. They're still wild, very wild, but they become domesticated to save them from being culled by the government. So my kid fell in love with a 3-year-old double cream horse. This horse is maybe like what they would call like a Cremelino or a Perlino. Kind of don't really know with wild horses unless you get a genetic test, which we won't. But anyway, this is a smaller horse with white hair and a blonde mane and pink skin and pale blue eyes, practically white eyes. It's very otherworldly looking horse, mystical looking, kind of a fairy-like horse, okay? And this horse has been renamed Reverie. And then I bought a nice looking horse for Reuben, my husband Reuben. At least, so this horse is going to be a good husband horse. They call them husband horses because they are selected for men who have no experience with or interest in horses, but who are getting dragged into horse culture by their wives and girlfriends who are horsey girls. So these horses need to become, pretty self-directed and emotionally sound, even-keeled, have very good common sense, horse sense about them, not easily spooked or excitable, more woe than go, because their riders are truly just along for the ride in every sense of the word. So, and Reuben's like a little bit afraid of horses, so I needed a very chill, mellow, energy conserving horse, shall we say. So I bought Reuben a nice big 2-year-old Palomino. So that's like a warm blonde haired horse with a cool blonde mane and tail. Kind of looks like Barbie's horse, Dallas. Did you ever have Dallas? Remember Barbie's horse? Looks a bit like that. And his name is Trigger. So if you're old enough to know who Roy Rogers was, then you would remember that Roy Rogers' horse, his name was Trigger. And Trigger, the horse, was famously known as the smartest horse in movies. And that's like kind of one of the cool things about the naming convention at Stelkaya Ranch. That's the place that does the herd management and runs the auction. Each year, they choose names for the horses, 24 horses or so that they bring in. And those names tell a story about the horse's heritage or their temperament. So like whenever they have a playful horse with a really outgoing personality who like really begs for scratches and attentions and like wants to goof around, they call him Jack. So every time they have a horse named Jack, they remind them of like the original horse they had called Jack, who had this like really goofy, fun, almost dog-like personality. And conversely, when they catch some of the horses from the high mountain herds that have like they have sort of tougher, more hardworking temperaments, like the ones who are going to make good backcountry horses for hunting, good pack horses, they give them names like Mountain and Timber. Okay. So Trigger has been singled out with that name because he's got the kind of temperament to be willing to perform tasks with like a stoic sense of duty and a real strong desire to bond with their human and like be in partnership with them. Like Trigger, that means the temperament is like a horse that gets off on service and teamwork. And I just think that's a really good fit for my husband. And then that leaves me with Bo, the wildie that I bought last summer, who's currently up on a ranch in the Caribou Chilcotin. And Bo is flashy and beautiful and a bit afraid of his own shadow. And he's an older horse. He's like 12 years old. He's a beautiful buckskin. And he's going to need me to bring my most grounded, calm, and confident self, my most like skillful somatic practitioner self, to help him get settled into a new herd and see if he wants to bond with me in a really deep, strong way so that we will be safe riding together one day. And so in order to do that, I'll be getting my own horsemanship lessons really consistently so I can become someone that he can trust and believe in, and so that I'm a truly competent and confident leader for him. So this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my time this year as I approach my 50th birthday in October. I hope all those things are going to add up to stability and resourcing and honestly, more beauty and fun around here for me because I'm aching for more beauty and fun to help me regulate my nervous system these days. Not that there isn't natural beauty here. Like all the resourcing things I mentioned earlier are true and are beautiful, but they're just not the same as co-regulation. Like visitations are not the same as interactions. They aren't a reliable, consistent relationship, right? And I didn't realize before I moved how much I actually co-regulate with beauty, like familiar, beautiful surroundings, having like an aesthetically pleasing space that is clean and uncluttered and with all my beautiful objects displayed in a, fetching way, and all my art around me, and like a bedroom that's a soothing sanctuary, and my rose garden, my herb garden. Like without all those things, my friends, I have become at times agonizingly adrift in just like 6 months without them. And I got a few more years of this. So these equine friends are coming in the nick of time, I'd say. And I am so, 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 so grateful for that. And, a friend, I had posted on Instagram a little video of going to the horse auction, me and V, my kid, and winning these horses. And my friend texted me this morning and said, like, she was crying and saying, like, basically, you have been mothering, like hardcore mothering, and I see you doing it. And yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now. I said 20 acres and a couple of horses. And I wasn't joking. I think that's what my child needs to survive this world. And it turns out me too. So I'm doing it. Good job, me. Huzzah. If you want to hear more about the wild horses of British Columbia, and I hope you do, because I think it's something we should keep tracking and advocating for, is wilderness corridors for them and protected status. If you want to hear more about them, make sure you circle back to episode 226 of the Numinous podcast called Wild Horses of the Chilcotin with Wayne McCrory. Okay, so that's my update. And now you'll know what's going on when I go quiet this summer. I am building fences to bring the horses home, making big muscles. And so this segues beautifully into today's episode, which is all about trying to parent in collapsed times, the choices we make and the things we prioritize, and how there's no easy answers and there's no easy path. But if we can be like process oriented and we can orient towards togetherness, beauty, and the craft of the small and delicious and community-oriented life, that if we can do that, then even collapse can have its upsides, and that there is a world possible for our kids that's better than the world they have now. And this conversation is about kind of brainstorming some ways we can think about preparing our kids to thrive even amidst turmoil. My guest today is Kirsten Hunter. Kirsten advocates for a return to earth-oriented living in response to the polycrisis of unraveling ecological, social, political, and spiritual systems in late-stage colonial capitalism. She's a mom, a civil servant, a volunteer counselor at a local mental health nonprofit, and a facilitator of the work that reconnects. Remember Joanna Macy's work? We talked about that on this show in the past. It's if you're unfamiliar with the work that reconnects, it's an experiential framework for navigating collective despair and hope and love for the world. Kirsten lives as a third-generation Euro-settler transplant in Saanich territory, colonially known as Saanich, BC. And that's where her and her family rent a small rundown acreage. Kirsten and family specialize in rebel gardening on rental properties with a focus on regenerative ecosystem restoration. They're also passionate about braiding together cross-cultural rituals and practices that reflect their mixed Coast Salish, Metis, and Euro-Pagan ancestral family lineages. Kirsten also attended the wilderness quest that I led. Well, Ruben and I hosted, but I led the quest part in 2023. So that means we got to share many a meal together in community and great deep conversations. And I am delighted that she accepted my invitation to come on the show today. I'm thrilled that you get to hear her wisdom as we discuss parenting amidst collapse. So, Kirsten, what identities do you lead with?
At this time in my life, I am working with a lot of what I would call functional identities, the ways that I am in relationship to the world around me. I'm a parent. I am a daughter, a very active daughter to aging parents right now, a sister to some dear beloveds, all friends and family, a chosen family. I'm a spouse. I've been married for, I think it's almost 16 or 17 years now. I really also am identifying right now as a renter, as somebody who lives somewhere with sort of impermanence and the ways that that impacts my world and resonate with other renters as well. And I'm also what I call a quirky bureaucrat. So I have a day job. It's with a public service organization, a very large institution, and it certainly does have a lot of impact on my life and on my energy and on the way that I'm able to show up for the world around me, in particular my family. And then there's also these identities that I notice I work with that feel more like how I show up to those roles. And the one that I've been sitting with a lot lately is feeling a lot of kinship with the compost heap. And as I was thinking about this, I remembered that TV show, I don't know if you ever watched it, called Fraggle Rock.
Fraggle Rock, yeah. The wise old compost. Yeah.
The heap.
The heap.
And I watched some YouTube, tidbits on her, and she's sort of sassy and she tells it like it is. She shoots from the hip. She offers help and hopefully some wisdom, but not with a lot of context. And I really appreciated kind of going back and reviewing those because I remember as a kid really loving that compost heap and loving when the little Fraggles would go to her and ask her for some advice. And the aspect of the compost heap that I think I'm most resonant with right now is this, these concepts of alchemy and transformation and taking all the stuff, all the matter, all the pieces and scraps and leftover nourishment and whatever wasn't used and transforming it into something that can be helpful, hopefully, to future growth and nourishment to the land in particular. And so, a lot of compost energy in my life right now.
That's beautiful. I love it. It's totally delightful, especially for those Gen Xers who are familiar with Fraggle Rock. Oh yeah, good memories. There's actually a thread between that and the renter identity, which is almost, I would say, renter class is going to be working class. So I want to put it under that appropriate umbrella. But I'm seeing a thread between renter class and maybe scavenger class or the alchemy class, the people who are okay, we have to make do with what we have and what's the richness, because it's not coming to us beautifully packaged and a la carte and delivered up perfectly for us. And that just seems like a really great sort of foundational baseline or context to give us for this conversation, because I was really keen to talk to you about kind of collapse themes and small and delicious life themes, attachment and parenting themes. But I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge that we're of the same class, you and I, and not everybody of every class is going to have the same experience of collapse. And so if you are somebody who's trying to do small and delicious life stuff as a renter, it's just very different. It's just very different. where I am now, which is on Ruben's parents' land, my in-laws, they have paid it off through, decades of hard work and having bought something in the 60s that they could pay off by the 2010s or something like that, or maybe it was a little, yeah, more recent than that. But they're very scavenger class. This place is filled with stuff that it's like, oh, but that might be useful. That could be, And yet the people next door who just bought land from another, you know, well, from folks who'd been in this valley since before there was a telephone, since before there was electricity in this valley. So this is like a young family. And I would say they are more of the capital class. They've, um, they come from family money in a business that's really influential in this small town. And like they're great looking tractors. They're chicken tractor. They're just like they've got all this stuff. If he's like, oh, I need to dig a trench, he's not out there. It's me and Ruben out there with shovels. He's got his little Kubota that he can just backhoe kind of stuff. It's like, wow, this is like okay, so we're both kind of back to the landers and we're both like tracking collapse, but like they have a really cute little Martha Stewart chicken coop. And ours is like an old trampoline that has been like kind of converted into hawk protection, It's not cute, not really. So, yeah, I can you tell us a bit about your background? Like, I'm maybe making a lot of presumptions here, but did you grow up in like an agricultural family? How did you come to find yourself as sort of a back to the lander who's a renter?
Yeah. Wow. It's like there are no farmers that I know of in my family.
Wow.
It's a real, I do find myself asking that question a lot. Like, how did I get here? Most of my family, who are sort of European descendants, sort of, colonial settlers in Canada, a little bit in the United States, were either fisher people, boat people, and didn't really grow up with a lot of models for land relationship at all. And then when my mom re-entered into a new relationship and my stepdad came into my life, his parents were quite homesteady.
Hmm.
And I remember in my sort of youthful years going to their house and picking all the peas and sitting in their living room in the house that they'd built and shucking all the peas and putting them in those big ice cream tubs and for the freezer. And then in the winter, we'd go to their house for dinner and they serve peas. Or, we'd go out to the garden and it would be a challenge to see who could pick the smallest, most delicious potato because the small ones were the best, right? And especially with some butter on them. So that was really the only model I had. And then sometime in my early 20s, I decided to try and build a garden in a rental property. And I didn't even get through the season before needing to leave that rental property because there's just, it's the rotating door of rentals. But I really did experience that feeling of taking a grassy patch and turning it into a garden. And that just got me hooked. I loved it. And then I went overseas and I did some work. My background is in the sort of the intersectional study of globalization, colonialism, and human rights. So I did some work overseas, and really, as I was doing that work, felt called to come home and be in the place that I had been, that I had grown up in, that I was born in, which is not my ancestral territory. I'm in Saanich territory on southern Vancouver Island. And the same year that I came home from my overseas work, I was living out of my car. I had $0. I maybe had, I think it was like $149 in my bank account. And so I was looking for opportunities to work on farms, kind of like woofing or, there's different programs. And I happened to encounter the boyfriend of a friend at a party, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm living out of my car and I'm looking for a place to live for a little while for free, and I can garden, I can work." And he said, "I'm driving to my farm in Saskatchewan like this week. Would you like to be my helper for the summer?" Well, we're married now, and we've been farming ever since.
Wow.
And so that first year, we grew a market garden and we took food to the market in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And we grow hemp, and we've been growing hemp ever since. And so from year to year, we've just figured out how to do it as renters.
Wow. So he was also still renting a farm at that time?
So he has family land in
Okay.
Saskatchewan. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got you. But you didn't stay in Saskatchewan. You were like, you both felt called to the coast, and so decided that it was better to rent land in an environment that felt a little more suitable than be where the land is secure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so I'm such a West Coaster. If I'm not surrounded by ocean, I feel very parched. But
Yes.
also, I got a job. That's when I came into sort of a career as a public service worker, and I got a
Okay.
job in Victoria. And Blake, as a hemp farmer, was turning his hemp into things like hemp hearts and hemp oil and hemp protein powder. And the West Coast was also where the
Yeah.
market was. And so what we did for the first few years is he would actually, Saskatchewan is so different for farming. You
Oh,
could just throw your crops there in the spring, and then there's like no irrigation a lot of the time. And then you
wow.
harvest them in the fall. There's no weeding, there's no irrigation, not in the big
Wow.
fields, right?
Yeah.
And so he would go for 4 to 6 weeks or 8 weeks in the spring and fall. I would go out and help a little bit here and there, and we did that for a number of years until we had kids, and then we had to reorganize ourselves.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about the composition of your family. And so, like, when we're talking about collapse resilience and we're foregrounding that as our topic, tell us a bit about who is in your immediate circle of care. Like, who are you thinking about when you're like, we want to be farmsteaders, we want to be back to the landers because this is who we're thinking about down the road?
Absolutely. I love that. Well, immediately right now, my family composition is my spouse and my two kids. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. My youngest child is came into our lives through adoption. And so we have a very mixed family. I am my partner is Cree, Mohawk, Métis, with some European ancestor, and my kids are uh, my eldest has also got my partner's lineage in him, and then our youngest is Coast Salish. Um, and we, as a family, are pretty oriented right now towards each other. Uh, and we also are really lucky to be living near both my birth family as well as my youngest birth family. And so, as much as possible, we are staying connected to our extended family members. But here's the thing about homesteading is that you're really busy doing it a lot of the time.
Yes.
So unless people are willing to come to you, it's pretty hard. And then of course we're mindful of how we interact with people right now. And so our world is pretty small.
Mhm.
And the other people that in our lives, you use the word scavenger at the beginning. I would say a lot of people in our lives who we are tracking with are also scavengers. And so there are some people in our close community who are our chosen family. And because we're the ones with the rental farm, they come over and they drop all their extra stuff, right? Their extra, there's a
Yeah.
llama living on our farm. So they bring over all their extra greens or their extra apples and they,
Mhm.
feed the llama. Um, and in terms of more tracking towards the future, one of the things that we have been doing over the last 10 years or so is since our marriage got started with a work trade kind of farm relationship, we host folks through a work trade program, and they're often in our circle of care. And so I would like to orient ourselves a little bit more, though, towards having people come to the farm who really need to be here.
Mm.
who need the space, who need the time, who need the connection to dirt and good, healthy food. But because we're renters, there's some limitations on sort of, what we can do as hosts. But in our circle of care right now, it really is, our immediate family and whoever else is willing to come and stay with us for a little while and pull weeds.
Yeah, yeah. When Ruben and I returned to the island from Vancouver, we were like, okay, we're gonna go back to, I'd spent 7 years in Vancouver and was like, okay, I'm ready to go back. And the idea was, oh, there's more people doing back to the land stuff, small and delicious life stuff. It'll be great. We'll be like around people. Oh my God, you can never connect with those people because you're all so freaking busy. Like, yeah, pulling weeds, moving house, crushing your own cider, growing your tomatoes, working or whatever. So yeah, I'll share with folks that we came to your land and you tended all the grains for us to grow for uh, wheat weaving workshops and stuff like that one time. And it was so great and it was so fun, but it's so hard to arrange because yeah, it's really tough to create community amongst people that are, when part of your hobby is like, we like to work hard for our hobby. And so
Yes.
it's pretty difficult. But tell us about like what else is there aside from the llama? I think people would want to know, like, how big are we talking here? What are you renting right now? What are you growing?
So the place that we're renting is just under 3 acres. It's really cute little uh, section of land at the top of a hill, surrounded mostly by big trees, which is really lovely. Um, and we have, I would say, about a fifth of an acre cultivated into flowers, herbs for like culinary herbs, medicinal herbs, and food. And we tend to try and focus on growing either what will heal us or what will sustain us through a hardship. So we grow a lot of squash, a lot of beans. We dehydrate a lot of tomatoes. We throw a lot of peas and beans in the freezer. It's it there there are some micro crops that we grow for the fun of it. Like right now, I'm growing some lentils and chickpeas, and we don't by any means grow enough to make more than maybe a meal. But there's also something really satisfying about keeping some genetics of those types of foods going so that if there was a scenario where we actually really did need to grow our supply of grain for the year, we could probably cobble together all the little crops that we grow and throw them in the field and prioritize those over lettuce, for example, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my partner does grow hemp. He's a licensed hemp grower, and we have been using hemp in various ways over the years as well.
Mm. Mm. Avant-garde, and as you say, that's really the market really is West Coast. So how much how much of his time or your time do you spend on like distribution and working markets and stuff? Because that's like a whole other thing. It's one thing to grow, it's another thing to let people know you have it, market it, and then
Hmm.
get it to them. Do you have like a farm stand? What do you do?
We don't have a farm stand. Where our also related to being a renter. There's sort of some
Hmm.
limitations on what we can do there. So we go to seedy Sundays and seedy Saturdays. Yeah, we have a company called the Good Seed, and we're not really focused on distribution right now. We're sort of, our family experienced a burnout. We spent 5 years on a huge 100-acre farm that we tried with a big dream to turn into a bit of a climate change, collapse resilience demonstration, retreat sort of space. And when it looked like things were not going to work out as we'd hoped, we also realized that we were exhausted.
Mm.
and
Hmm.
uh, and so we've been in replenishment mode for the last
Mm.
few years, and we've really been just prioritizing getting into a good flow on this land. This is our fourth growing season here, which feels nice and appropriate.
Mm.
Four is an important number in seasonal living
Hmm.
with the four seasons and the four directions, which is a space that our family spends a lot of time doing ritual around. And yeah, so we're not super focused on making money off the land, I guess is really one way to say that. And we're really more focused on just having a really good quality of life while we can on this little sort
Mm.
of rental property for as long as it allows us, as long as the circumstances allow.
Hmm. Hmm. How much do you worry about that? How long it will be allowed? Because yeah, you don't want to really develop a lot of business infrastructure around something where
Hmm.
your like primary resource, the land, may at some point not be available to you and you have to relocate or something. So that makes sense. But how much do you worry about that?
This is such a good collapse skill related question. This sort of constant questioning and inquiry around how much do I invest when I don't know what the outcome will be?
Hmm.
How much do I give when I can't guarantee the results?
Hmm.
And I think maybe I don't worry so much about whether or not we'll get to stay here because I feel pretty confident in our family's ability to do what is necessary to make it work. And we always have. This is our third rental farm. This is our third time where we've come in and totally transformed and regenerated and brought in birds and bees and pollinators and so much life onto what otherwise often pretty sterile yards.
Hmm.
And we'll do it again if we have to, because it's sort of an
Hmm.
obsession, I suppose. There's a relentlessness and tenacity to it that you kind of just can't get away from once you start. Um, so, where I think more there's some lamenting or sorrow around not knowing if the trees we've planted here will get to grow old, not knowing if when we leave this place, if the birds will still be able to come back to the species that they've become accustomed to that we've planted. And, I think there's some yeah, there's a trepidation that I think I walk with a lot as a renter around just really wanting for the land that we're on to continue to feel the love, and
Hmm.
knowing that chances are if we moved off this place, the only person who could afford it would be someone who had lots of capital. And in my experience, people with lots of capital don't tend to like lots of garden eccentricity. So I don't want to, maybe I'm being cynical here, but I think that's where my heart feels a little tender and kind of achy is this. I'm not worried about us. We'll figure it out. We'll bring our seeds with us. And like
Hmm.
when we moved here, we brought 2 trucks loads worth of plants.
Wow. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but it's more like, will the land be okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When we left Victoria, we had this odd thing happen where, having lived for a long time, moved several times, putting in gardens, uh, and like sometimes doing things at like a pretty extensive scale where it, yeah, was just like hard pan old grass to like, and now it's lush and thriving and there's animals and plants and all of that. But always thinking that like it's going to go to the next renter or maybe somebody who buys the house and then they will get this great soil. And when we left, it's because we got rent evicted because the landlord sold to a developer and was going to consolidate the three and put up these townhouses. Now, we lived essentially downtown. So I would be like, well, inner city, you need to have more housing, and this looks pretty nice. But the thing is, only very wealthy people can afford these quote unquote starter homes at $800,000 for this, townhouse. And also, like, but what about the ancestor tree? But what about the nettles I put in? But what about the underground stream? But what about the soil? Like, what are you talking about if this is going to be a underground parking garage? Like, what? That sorrow of, yeah, how will the land be if I'm not here holding the line? That's like a particular kind of grief for folks who are living in this kind of way. So I really, really, really resonate with that kind of ambiguous anticipatory loss, that like how long can we keep it in the hands of folks who are tending? I hope it's a long time for where you are, because that is a really beautiful, beautiful spot. I'm curious about you mentioned like you have people who come on the land and they're often in your care, and you also have a preteen and a teen. Do your boys seem particularly agriculturally inclined? How is it for them to have people coming on? You've helped us figure like pre-plan for bringing people to this land here. So I want everybody to know like Kirsten is a go-to person for like how do we create that sanctuary space in a good way so that we don't get burnt out bringing people on because that's a lot of work
Mhm.
too, and like maybe have things not work out. But we don't have like small kids that we also have to think about who's influencing and shaping their, you know, emergent minds and nervous systems and all of that. So how is that for your kids?
Yeah, it's been such a beautiful journey getting to host people from all over the world. And as I say that, I even notice like there's also some complexity to it, right? I myself am not of ancestral lineage on the land I live. I carry a lot of privilege uh, being here. And, even as you were saying before, too, sort of that feeling of anticipatory loss of the land and wondering how the land will be. I mean, that is a felt experience that has happened here in Canada, in North America, anywhere where colonization has very actively tried to erase Indigenous connection to the land. And so I'm sitting with that as we have this conversation too, and as I recognize like even just the privilege that I have to welcome other people to this land where I
Mm-hmm.
live and offer them connection to plants and soil and good healthy homegrown food and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just on my mind as we have this conversation, and having people come into our lives who we've never met before, who, at most we've had a couple of email exchanges and a WhatsApp conversation, often don't speak the language we do with fluency, or we don't speak their language with fluency. And showing them our way of life has been such a gift for our family because I think there's a number of things that happen. One, it just makes our lives easier to have people sharing the load. And so then
Mm-hmm.
we have more time to connect with the kids and we have more time to enjoy the beauty of the land instead of just toiling on it all
Yes.
the time. But also, our kids get to see what a model of other like people making themselves vulnerable, joining another family, offering their care, offering their presence, offering their skill or their willingness to learn. We've really loved that our kids get to see what that looks like. And of course, we have had to do tons of work to develop safety and trust around welcoming somebody into our home. And I've always kind of considered that a collapse skill too. Like, I really want our
Mm-hmm.
family to be prepared to welcome people onto the land as needed under collapse. And so we have found various ways to make sure that our kids feel safe when new people come in. And a lot of that is around how we share meals and what we talk about around the table, and making sure that our kids are part of the conversation and the person who's staying, we call them our helper.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best word, but we used to, the program we started off working with was through HelpX. And so that's just stuck.
Mm-hmm.
um, but this act of opening up the home and inviting people in, and as a result, having good quality time together because we're home, we're working together, we're cooking together, we're eating together, we're gardening together, the kids are playing at the edges and in the corners and in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been really special for our family, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. And I know a lot of people often ask, how do you do it? How do you engage with all these strangers? Doesn't that take a lot of energy? And it does, but the rewards are so rich.
Mm-hmm.
And, so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I may have
Well,
lost track of the
it
question.
does. No, I love the context that you're creating for your kids to be able to not only learn how to say yes to extending trust to new people, and but also how to take risks and be the person who gets welcomed. Like, oh wow, these people are traveling. That's a thing. They're finding like-minded people and going into a stranger's home and being willing to be adopted for a period of time into that culture, into that rhythm, and into that circle of care, that is a collapse skill, 100%. And obviously there would be so many things about discernment and boundaries and communication and regulation, self and co-regulation, just, all of that, and how to both offer and receive contact nutrition in return. I mean, it's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful thing. And so do you see signs that your kid, like, it sounds like your kids are not uh, totally captured by so many of the problems of modernity, of, for instance, toxic masculinity from right-wing sources targeting young boys online, the online misogyny and things like that. Like, can you tell us a little bit about what that's like? We get a lot of questions about
Mm,
how to parent in collapse
yeah.
in the network during the collapse AMAs. And there's just a very particular fear about uh, young men and boys in this moment, and how they're going to, where we're going to tip the scales towards more compassion and empathy like you're creating for them. So did they show signs of like yearning for the digital life?
Oh, well, that's certainly one of my biggest fears in collapse is people, but in particular the younger generations right now and their relationship with the sort of more toxic aspects of the online and digital worlds. And one of the things that we're parenting or we're tracking in our parenting is how to create a lifestyle for our kids where they can experience wonder and joy and love for the world. And that's a big part of why we choose to rent on farms rather than potentially, buy an apartment that might be something we could afford. But to sort of be vulnerable to the constant change and insecurity of renting, so that we can be on land, so that our kids can experience that. I mean, right now they're 13 and 10, but right now they have a bullfrog in a big sort of pond that we've built out back, and they're just feeding him every day. They come home from school and they find those little curly pig pill bugs and snails and stuff, and they go feed him and they check on him, and bullfrogs are invasive. I just want to clarify that for any listeners who are worried about the poor
Yeah.
bullfrog. But we have
Yeah.
also beautiful little native frogs that we're trying to protect. So the bullfrog gets extracted from the environment and
Gotcha.
becomes
He
a
gets
pet.
fed, so he's not eating the locals. Okay, that's
Yes.
great. That's great.
um, So, a big part of how I'm coping with the fear of young people not caring about the world enough to participate in it as they get older, when my kids are older and they're surrounded by all these other people who are sort of oriented towards the digital world in ways that disconnect them from what, our family holds as important. Um, but no, for sure, the kids want to be in the digital world. Absolutely. And the way that we have hopefully balance that out. And we talk to our kids about this all the time, and they seem pretty okay with it. We're very participatory. We're very collaborative with our kids. We ask them all the time, like, how's it going? Would you like something different? Is there something that you'd want to have in our family to make things interesting for you? What do you need to have at home so that your friends want to come over? Because we're not that family with the gaming systems. And so what we have done to balance it out a bit is just have really old school gaming systems. Our kids are not allowed to game online with other people. So if they want to do if they want to play games, they go onto like our super retro systems and play super retro games.
Okay.
But it also turns out pretty good, because then when their friends come over, they're getting access to things that are novel to them.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think I'm careful not to take too much credit for the fact that our boys are very interested and engaged in the world. I think that there's a lot more to it, and I think in lots of ways we are very lucky that the children that we're raising, they lean towards that as is, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
also really mindful that for some kids, our lifestyle couldn't even work because it would just be way too busy, way too stimulating, way too
Mhm.
isolating. Like we're home a lot, all four of us in the living room, reading, playing, messing around with herbs.
Mhm.
Like we're
Right.
all in the living room together a lot.
When you're thinking about collapse, does the digital world, or like having skills for your kids, like, do you, does it come into your parenting to be like, well, maybe you should go to college, or maybe you know, like, what do you think is important in terms of like the hard skills and the soft skills that you're trying to encourage your kids to lean in collapsed times? Like, will you care if they're like, I never want to go to post-secondary? Will you care if they stay with you for the rest of time? Will you care if they're like, I want to move to the Dominican Republic, and since we don't really believe in flying, or since it's so expensive, I might only see you every couple of years? Like, what are your hopes for them?
Oh, I love this. And I really, for me right now, it all comes down to tracking what gifts I bring and I offer. Like, so modeling to my kids, like, here's who I am. So I'm just going to be who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how I do that. And then working with my kids to track what they love and what their gifts are. And really, like, I was just having this conversation with my 13-year-old the other day, because I actually reviewed the questions that you sent me in advance with them. I was like, let's talk
Oh,
about these.
yeah.
How would you answer them? And it was the first time I heard my 13-year-old say, I think I want to go to college. And I was like, tell me more. and,
Yeah.
and he said, well, I want to do something that is useful to people and that I can like make enough money to live off of. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm really hoping for is that my kids get to explore what is interesting to them and what their gifts are. And the conversation we have a lot of the time is, what do you love doing that other people would pay for?
Yeah, totally.
so, so not so much in those words, but what do you love doing? What feels in flow for you? And so my hope is that if that's the digital world, there is so much value in a healthy online environment. And I can really see what that could do. And maybe I'm just, my kids are too young right now for us to really go there, because they would not be able to navigate that without a lot of support. And I'm not the one to support them.
Mm-hmm.
But if eventually their lives are primarily online, or their lives are overseas, or their lives are in the bedroom in my next rental,
Yeah.
because that's all going to be fine. I'm not too worried about it. I myself am not so much of a track into the future, see what's going to, like, see something out there and try and get there, but more like, let's just keep noticing what's emergent, what's here,
Mm-hmm.
just sort of this ever widening spiral, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so we'll just take the next circle and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I commend to your kids if they're interested in solar. That would be amazing. Yeah, because there's so much you can do. There's so many fun projects, but also so many life-giving, absolutely critical systems to survive. But if they think that's fun, those are great collapse jobs. I'm speaking more to the folks who are listening, who are like, what should my kid do? It's like, I highly recommend the trades once again. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if my kids end up in the trades, because they have watched their mom end every workday exhausted. And they ask me, what do you do? If anybody asks me what I do for work, it's like, I think and I write and I talk. Like, that's what I do for work. That's what a bureaucrat does, right? And so I think it's very clear to them that their dad has the better half of the lifestyle here,
Right.
which is like, you know, and we're very lucky to also have some family friends who present or model to our kids a lifestyle of sort of this nomadic, handy person who can just go wherever they go and help out wherever they are. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I totally agree. And I'm definitely hoping my kids feel like they can get educated if they want to, that we can afford it, like all of that. I hope
Mhm.
that occurs. Um, but I'm really trying not to. And this is something that is totally different from how I grew up. I don't know if this is the same for you or for listeners, but the world is your oyster. You can do anything you want. You have to go out and do something. Go out and do something. And
Mhm.
I think maybe just my reaction to that has been so challenged. I've had so many of my mental health and my depression and my issues throughout my life have been around sort of the should, you should do this, you should be that. And so I've maybe taken it to the extreme, and I don't do a lot of, sort of like asking, what do you think you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
Or where do you think, we don't go there at all in our family. It's like, this is what needs to be done right now. Who's going to offer what skills to the job?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we're so similar here. So nobody in my family, very few had graduated high school. And so never mind go to college. Nobody had gone to college. I don't think anybody actually has yet. Let me think. No, nobody's gone to college. Yes, I've saved money. Yes, there's a little nest egg if they want to do some kind of program or trade, or like at least get them started if they decided at some point. I think you have to use it by the time you're like 36 or something like that to get your Canada grant. But lately, my kid was like, what do I say when people ask, so what are you doing? Like, essentially, it's so are you going to college? Where do you go? Like, you're 21. What are you doing with your life? My kid goes, can I just say I'm like a homesteader? And I was like, well, first of all, there's some like complex feelings around the word homestead because it is so much
Mhm.
about settler colonialism. I'm not sure we want to perpetuate that. And my kid's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, what's Ruben's really working with farmstead right now, which kind of implies like the small scale, but also the return to agriculture where we are. But I had to ask my kids, so let's role play. What do you grow? How many acres? How many, that sort of thing. My kid was like, oh, not really quite sure. But I thought, isn't that so interesting that they come across this question so often that they are kind of freaked out. Like, what do I tell people when they ask me what I do? I'm like, I have never put any pressure on this child to be anything other than an artist. It's so obvious they're an artist and writer since they were a kid. So I was like, why don't you just say you're an artist? And it's like, then they want to see my art and I don't want it to tell. So it's like, right.
Yeah.
So it's a complex time to be a parent. How do you cope with the concerns that you have for your boys? Like, do you have other parents that are in this with you? Like, do you talk about this a lot with your partner? Like, how are you supported as a parent in collapse times, if at all?
Oh, yeah. That's the question, isn't it? I'm not necessarily surrounded by people who believe or see or are tracking collapse the same way I am in my immediate circles. I am often the one who's saying the things that everyone else wants to roll their eyes at or, not get into. Um, Especially in my family, my broader family. But it's certainly something that my husband and I share. And so it is something that we talk about a lot. Um, and we're pretty collaborative with our kids. I mean, we're not talking to our kids about how everything is going to fall apart, but
Mm-hmm.
we are talking to our kids about how we can't predict their future the same way
Mm-hmm.
that it was assumed we could predict ours.
Mm.
Um, and so that is one of the ways that we cope is just by being really honest that we can't say for certain that they can expect to go a certain distance in the capitalist system as it's currently structured. Um, I think one of the ways that we cope is by being out in the garden. That is like the garden is the coping. Like as much as there is this sense that we may not have such lusciousness in the future because we're in the Pacific Northwest. There's still a lot of vibrant ecological energy here
Mm-hmm.
in some place. There's also a lot of struggle, but um, we can see that there is, and so we point that out. We can see what's lush and what's beautiful, and we can also see what's struggling. Right, the cedar trees here are struggling. The
Mm-hmm.
orcas in this area are struggling, and so we find like how we cope is we sort of tell the truth about where things are struggling, and then we go and here's how we're coping with this. We're getting out into the garden, and look what happens when you plant this. The birds come. And look what happens when you plant this. The bees come.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about our food. Actually, that's like one of our biggest coping strategies is we talk about food all the time. So what we have this practice of introducing our meals, and we identify everything in our meal that is something we either grew or scavenged, because we're pretty good at
Mm-hmm.
scavenging food as well. And so it's more about like just normalizing that, we're going to work with what we have, and we're going to find joy and glimmer by going out into our front yard. And we don't even have to go any further than that. It's enough. It's more than enough. And so I think that's really how we cope, is by setting up our lifestyle as a small and delicious life.
Mm.
Um, and this word kept coming to me as I sat with as I sat with this question. When I think about this question, like, how do I actually cope with the fact that in lots of ways I am almost always the sort of the most adulty adult in the room. So I am usually my biggest resource. I think you can
Yes.
probably relate.
Yes.
So, I mean, the Numinous Network is huge for my support network, right? It's the space that I go to be me and be surrounded by people who see the world in similar ways and feel validated in that world. And then bringing that back into my life, right? Working on attachment practices. My 13-year-old came home on Friday after a really hard day at school, and he let me sit with him for 2 hours and go through what had occurred with him. And we talked about how, his brain was developing and how he's going to be making more mistakes in his teens because his prefrontal cortex is just doing so much wild work right now. And, like just like normalizing that, yeah, teenagehood sucks and I'm going to be here with you. And, another way that we cope is I have this practice in my home of whenever a kid is struggling, they just come into my bed, right? It's like, just let's go lay down, and we just lay next to each other, and whatever happens, happens. We put on a song, we put on a podcast, we put on a story, we read. They love graphic novels. They'll just read their graphic novels. I'll read my book. Whatever it is, we'll just kind of, for me, like what I want my kids to see as the model of when you get overwhelmed, when things are too much, like slow right down. We don't have to rush into solving. We don't have to rush into reacting. We can just slow it down enough to really feel what's going on within ourselves and then respond from there. And that's a big, like I always say, clean up the mess with rest.
Oh, oh my gosh, clean up the mess with rest. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a great motto. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love how contact nutrition rich those moments of kind of meltdown or moments of crisis are in your home. I'm sure that's very inspiring for many people. I'm sure there are people too who are like, "Oh no, that ship has passed." But you know what? We can give corrective experiences at any age. Just hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, my little lonely oldest daughter, like parentified child, loves to hear that you're doing that. And I would want to do that now at any time in my life. If my parent had been like, you know what, maybe we should try a different tack here. That would have been great. I might not have accepted it the first time, but like if that became the practice, I can imagine that even if there's a listener who's like, oh no, I've missed the boat with my teen son or whatever, I bet you haven't. I bet you haven't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would want to really be clear here that this has been such a process of trial and error. I had major postpartum depression with my first, and there was a lot of parenting that I have had to repair from.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my youngest came into our lives through adoption, and so there's a lot of attachment work that we have to do there. Um, my partner and I have a lot of healing that we have to do through, different rifts that we've had in our relationship. Like it is a constant repair workshop around here.
Yes.
We're mechanics in
Yes.
our own right.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, this is why that's such an important collapse skill, right? Because none of us are going to be our best selves in collapse all the time. So, yeah, learning how to repair and try new things, recover emotion, Yeah, I
Yeah.
I love to hear that. Where do you hope you and your family are in like 10 years or beyond? Like do you have an ideal vision for collapsing as resiliently as possible? I should also say we haven't actually defined collapse. I'm kind of assuming that people have listened to other things, but let's say people just parachuted in
Yeah.
and are like, "Oh, this is the first episode of the Numinous podcast I've ever heard." Maybe you could define when you think of collapse, like what is that? And then what do you think would be like a good adaptive future for you 10 years from now or beyond?
Mm. Oh, yeah. What is collapse? To me, collapse has always felt, it's been something that I've felt since a really young child that like nothing is as it seems. The systems that I have been told are the ones that I should buy into feel inherently absurd to me, that you can
Mhm.
just get whatever you want whenever you want it, as long as you have the resources, and your worth is tied to how much of the resources you've had access to.
Yeah.
But also, so collapse for me is more like it's my own collapse of being able to exist within the system that I've been told is supposed to be the norm, and me going like,
Mm.
that does not make sense to me. Right? And
Yeah.
sort of just feeling awkward and gangly in my life, my whole life of like, this doesn't make, that doesn't fit. My skin doesn't feel right in this system, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so then collapse for me is also the sort of losing access to the things that we have become accustomed to, we being sort of maybe dominant culture or capitalist culture, or maybe it's Western culture, but particularly this ability to access, food, water, shelter, based on the resources we have, uh, and that the system we live in, we will survive in the system that we live in based on how successful we are at surviving in that system that we live in,
Right.
if that somehow makes sense.
Yeah.
So, um, and also, I don't want to scare any of our listeners, but I do think that collapse looks a lot like things getting worse before they get better. And so, we
Mhm.
have, in particular for me, collapse looks like, maybe I sometimes use the analogy of like an animal who is coming to the end of their life, who's got rabies or who's got a disease, and they sort of become more aggressive and more
Mhm.
violent and more destructive before they finally get to be at peace. And I
Mhm.
think of like capitalism as sort of being there right now, right? It's kind of doing its last gasp, and as a result, it's going to hurt, more, farther reach, and
Mhm.
so that's what collapse is for me. And so in terms of, what I where I want to be, what I want to see for my family in collapse within the next 10 years, um, I can't lie that I wouldn't wish that we could be on some kind of stable long-term land situation. I would love for us to be somewhere where we actually get to plant trees and dig ponds and build, regenerate and heal ecosystems in a way that we could actually watch that occur. And I want that for us, not just because I want the security of us being on the land, but I also really want to establish myself as a person who has skills and tools that are available to the community in such a way that that takes time, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, I want people in my neighborhood to know that they can come to my house and get the herbs that they need, or a hug, or,
Mhm.
a meal, or an extra blanket, and building relationships. Especially when you're a person who likes to be on a acreage, which means you don't necessarily have like a lot of close neighbors.
Mhm.
Building relationships when you don't own a place and you don't know how long you're going to live there, is different.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so definitely like hold for us a hopeful vision that one day we end up on a piece of land where we get to stay for the long term, and my kids can have tiny homes or whatever there,
Mhm.
and they can just always know that they can land there. But I'm also really mindful that my energy, I'm in my 40s, to start up new over and over again is probably, coming to an end of its season. My body's starting to show signs that I can't dig a whole new garden by hand every 5 years.
Mhm.
So there's another part of me that also holds a vision of just living in a cute little house in a cute little neighborhood with, um, the stand at the front of free food and free books and free extra stuff. And I'd love to be known as like the local witch who has the herb blend that you need in your tea. And so for your day that you're having.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And so I'm holding these two visions, and again, I'm not somebody who really sets a vision and then goes towards it. I'm more like, those would be nice, and we're just gonna, as long as I have my plants, and as long as some birds and some bees are visiting those plants, I think like that's really the vision that I can hold with some clarity. The other visions feel tenuous. It's like, who knows what's going to happen? Am I ever going to be able to afford anything? I don't know. But really, when I really look at it and I see myself sitting 10 years from now, I'd like my kids to know that they'll be in their early 20s. I'd like them to know that they can just walk in any moment and get what they need. And I would like other people to know that too. And I would like some plants surrounding me that smell good and attract fun little visitors.
Yes. Yes, beautiful plants. And so it is. So
and
be
so
it,
it
see
is.
to it. Yes. Okay, so the last question, as always, is how are you coping with grief and rage these days?
Oh, grief and rage are constant companions. They have been my whole life. And how I work with them lately is quite different than how I did earlier in my life, which was more through sort of depressive episodes and explosive episodes. And really, for me now, I think it goes right back to kind of where we started, which is the compost pile, the complicated compost pile. I turn to the garden, I turn to the compost pile, and I go like, when the grief surfaces, I ask the question, like, what is asking to be tended here? What, is this a scenario where things just need to be like, be with, just be with and let it happen? Or is this a scenario where there's some anaerobic kind of gunk going on that needs a bit of a stir, right? Or is this a crowd? Like, there's just too much? Is there too much going on right now? Am I in overwhelm? Do I need to do a bit of weeding and kind of clearing and creating some oxygen and some space around things? So I do use my garden and the sort of natural systems and sort of ecosystems and systems thinking to move through grief and rage pretty significantly. And then something that I've been doing more and more lately is exploring prayer and just praying, reaching out and asking for witness and support from the wider realms. And that's a harder one for me to do with good, with good regularity, but I do reach for it more and more.
Thank you for naming that. I feel a little surprised sometimes how often I catch myself in prayer. Like I think in a different context, I might have been, people would have been like, oh, she hears voices. She's, something like that. But I'm like, no, I actually feel I often have the phrase like, Great Mother, Spirit Creator, thank you for safe passage through the night. Please hear me. This is what I'm dealing with, and I maybe always did it, but boy, I'm doing it a lot lately. So I wonder if there's something in the collective, and maybe there are listeners who needed to hear that. Thank you for all the wisdom you shared today, Kirsten. I'm so honored to have you as a friend, and that I know there are so many people who are scared as parents, and you are modeling just such a beautiful, collapsy, adaptive, resilient way to face the challenges as caretakers and tenders of young people and land. So thank you for sharing your wisdom today.
Thanks, Carmen. My pleasure. It was really, really wonderful to spend this time with you.
Nice. Check out the show notes in your podcast player or at numinouspodcast.com for links to Kirsten's family's hemp farm and her Instagram account. I would love to hear what you think of this episode. I have certain people, particularly certain members of the Numinous Network in mind, that I'm going to definitely forward this episode to them, because I would say questions about parenting and collapse come up almost every month or every other month in our collapse AMAs in the network. And it's just really nice to connect with other people who are tracking this. So thank you, Kirsten, for modeling. What a great possibility model. Okay, wrapping up here, I want to thank everyone who has sent me emails and DMs to let me know they've been moved in some way by what I shared about my personal life, particularly around parenting in the past 3 or so episodes, but especially the response I got from episode 268, the one called When Personal and Collective Collapse Collide. I've never heard from so many people reaching out in so many different ways, some from the perspective of parents caring for kids with complex needs, or just like who are tracking collapse and trying to figure out, like, do we make these hard choices? If we do, when, and then also I've heard from some of you who have the lived experience of being dynamically disabled or chronically ill as an adult, who has felt soothed by the voice of a parent who believes them, like, meaning they're not really getting that at home. And so hearing me talk about the ways I'm, just believing my kid and tracking them and supporting them in the way I describe in that episode, I appreciate you letting me know that it has touched you as an adult and it's like been a corrective experience for you. And there's been lots in between. I haven't responded to everyone individually, but I just want to let you know, I really appreciate your care. And I thank you for sharing your experience with me. And I really thank you for listening and grappling with these difficult and vulnerable things with me. If you want to come hang out with like-minded people grappling with the world in this way, I invite you to join us as a member of the Numinous Network. It's an online space where we care for caregivers and we support folks with sensitive nervous systems, and we grapple together in real time. Check out the Numinous Network at carmenspanyola.com, CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.